All right, everybody, this is Magnus with Bubble Wraps again with part 2 of installing our ice surface. Again, this is little North Star's project table I'm finishing up. We're in the garage here with it. Remember in the last video, so it's probably best to cut out all the things we need to cut out from the vinyl when it's on the table. So that's what we got. We've got the vinyl here ready to go on the table, and we will finish this up. So remember, what you're gonna need preferably is one of these X-Acto pen knives to make the fine, kind of detailed cuts we need to. Again, you don't have to, but it makes things a whole lot easier. So first thing we need to cut out, remember there is I'll try and flip this over so you can see it. Basically, we're going to cut out everywhere where we see gray. So it's the player slots, the eject hole, goalie slot, the slot around the goal mouths. We can cut out around where the dome bolt holes go. But we're going to start with this notch here, which is where the hinge and the ribbon cable for our scoreboard go, because this is going to have to be removed first before we lay anything down in place. So we're going to start with this. I always like making my cuts from the top side down. That way, if there's any kind of hanging edges, they can fold over along the side rather than cutting from the bottom up and any of that gray potentially showing. So we'll flip this back over. And before we slide anything in position, we're just going to cut out the slot here for the hinge and the cord. So we'll just feel where the edge is, make an incision with our X-Acto knife, and again, you don't even need to saw. A nice sharp blade and this thin point knife will just kind of slice right through the vinyl very easily with no. You don't want to saw. In fact, if you saw, the more you saw, kind of the more uneven the edge is going to be. So we'll do that half. Over here, we'll get this half. All right, there he is. For the hinge, got a little more to cut out here. Right at the red line here for the cable, or the ribbon, which is right there. Good. So we got the hinge cut out. Any excess we can just fold over the edge. All right, so that's the first cut we need to make. There's one other section we need to cut out before we lay this flat down the ice, and that is these little posts right here. There's a little threaded post there, and there's an opposite one on the opposite goal piece, or behind the opposite goal, I should say. And that corresponds to, if I flip this over, that corresponds to these holes right there. So that post just kind of comes through and anchors this thing in place, keeps it from sliding around some. So we're going to cut out these two holes next. Then we'll be able to lay this whole thing down on the ice and cut out everything else without problem. So we'll find that hole just by feeling around. There it is. There's one. And we'll feel around on this side. It's right there. Okay, now with both of those removed, we can get our ice at least initially set into position. All right, there we go. From here, how you tackle the rest of this is up to you. Again, we're gonna need to cut out around here, which is where the goals go on both sides. There's a goalie track right there, the center ice, and then our 5 player tracks on each side. So wherever you prefer to start tackling it, I'm gonna start at the goal mouth here. Just find that's the largest opening, so I'll find where that goal goes. You don't need to be in a rush with this. And sometimes I find when you get that last little edge of the flap, you don't want it to flap around, so I just kind of grab it and hold it. That way you keep it tight as you make that last cut. And this will apply for the player tracks as well. All right, there we go. Do the same on the other goal mouth. All right, there is that. Now all that is left, we'll do the goalie tracks and the player tracks. I'm just gonna do a couple of the player tracks because obviously it's pretty repetitive. After that, so we'll do the goalie slot here. And like I said, this more time you take going around these little curved edges, the better it's gonna look, the better it's gonna come out. Even if there are any little jagged edges, you can certainly tuck them back underneath. And same with this, for that last cut, I kind of like just kind of hold it onto the little flap here that I've created, just to keep it taut. A little tag here that I didn't quite get. Let's go over that again, remove that. We'll do the center ice. Don't forget to do the center ice eject button, or you're gonna wonder why your puck never goes into play when you start this. Again, I'm just gonna hold on to this last little flap so I keep it tight as I cut. All right, there's our eject goal, and we'll do 1 or 2 of the player tracks, and we'll finish this up offline. You know, if you find when you're doing this that you're kind of ripping more than your blade is cutting, probably means you could stand to have a fresh blade in your penknife. Mine is just starting to get a little dull, so I think after this track I will probably swap out my blade with a fresh one just to get the cleanest cut possible. One player track, all the rest of them get removed pretty much the same way. Remember, we got 5 in each side, plus we need to do the goalie on the opposite side. But once that is done, your vinyl ice sheet is all applied. What you can do is, you don't necessarily need to remove it all, but I do like to poke a little hole where the bolts for the dome go. That way the bolts just go through and don't puncture. There's already a hole for them to go through. You don't necessarily need to remove all the material. That's up to you, but I would at least make a hole in each hole so that don't bolts. When you lower it and put the bolts in, they've already got a hole to go through. But that is pretty much it for installing your ice wrap. Just slow, get the right knife, be slow, deliberate, take your time, and at the end, if you like, usually periodically as I polish my dome with Pledge every now and then, this vinyl ice wrap, the clear laminate surface takes polish pretty well, so again, after I do my dome, I may spray a little Pledge on the surface and give that a buff, once a quarter, a couple times a year or so, and you can really get this polished up to a mirror-like shine that keeps the puck gliding just as nice as it does on the bare plastic surface. Okay, we are back. We finished, so you see, cutting out all the player tracks, holes for the goalie slots, everything is cut out that we need to. All that is left to do is install our nets and pop the goalie tracks back up where they're supposed to go. So to get the goalie up here, you notice the goalie knob here rotates this little cam, this little sliding block with a peg on it. Has to sit up on this aluminum track to slide back and forth to get the goalie to move. So the only trick here is you got to get that little peg slot back through the hole there in the crease before you get your ice surface to lay back. And on this side we'll have to do the same for this goalie. I'm cutting out the tracks. So usually just slide this little goalie block down out of the way so it's not interfering with anything. So we'll pop him up on the track, make sure it moves freely, and then we'll lay our ice surface down so that the goalie peg slides through the hole. Get it back through the two little threaded pegs there on both sides. And that is the goalie slot. So now the only thing we have left to do is get our goals in place. So our goals, whether they are the stock checks, one of these happen to be the Thomas Bovart replacement nets, which are quite nice. I've swapped these out on all my tables. These go in through the ice from the bottom, so we're gonna have to lift our ice up again. You notice there's a little slot in the back of these as well. That goes over this little peg as well. So we'll notch it over the peg. Slide the net in place. Make sure our goalie block stays in place. And we should be able to lower our ice sheet back down. And there we go. So then the goal is held in place from the top by the ice sheet. Do the same with the opposite goal. Lift the ice up, slide the notch in the goal around that little peg. And throw the ice sheet down around it. The last thing there is to do to finish this ice surface wrap is remember we cut off the behind the goal ramp and the corner ramps. We're going to put these back on. So I'll start with this corner one. And like I said in the first video, a lot of times you can see or feel the outline of where the ramp originally went, which I can just make that out here on mine. So I'm going to be able to use the outline of the original ramps to reapply. Again, though, if you didn't, and remember you took those measurements, you can make the measurements again. I believe the corner of this one was 3.5 by 2 3/4. And you can put a little dot on your ice there, and that would indicate to you where you need to start this corner of the corner ramp. And then it was like 1 1/4 was the distance from the back edge to the edge of the ice here. So you could do that. Again, in this instance, I can see through the vinyl now still where that ramp went. So I'm just going to glue it back in the same place. As far as adhesive, what works best, I like kind of a gel-like adhesive. I use this E6000 stuff. If you can still find like a goop I've used in the past, works pretty well. Even, I like kind of a gel type, something that is going to give it a little holding power right away. So not like regular super glue. You might do a few dabs of a kind of a gel super glue might work, in which case if you did that, I'd just do a few points around the ramp. But I like this E6000. Potentially even rubber cement might work if you're able to kind of coat it on thinly enough. But I'm going to start out by doing a few dabs of this E6000. And I like this stuff, so it's thick enough to stay where I put it. It gives me enough time to kind of move things around before it sets up. So I just start with a kind of a dab in the corners. And then I don't use much on the edge. I try to run just a thin bead right on the inside edge of this. Because, again, they just need to stay in place and not move during gameplay. You don't need them super strongly adhered. So that should be enough. So now that's on, I'm going to find my corner. It's right there. Press it down. I'll just check the measurements real quick. 1 1/4 inch, 1 1/4, 3 1/2, and 2 3/4. So I just set that there. One thing I do like to do, just to make sure nothing's shifted, I like closing the dome. Make sure the dome closes around it. I had one table where it just, for whatever reason, the ice shifted a little bit, and the ramp I glued back in place kind of interfered with closing the dome. So I'll close the dome real quick, just to make sure it sticks in place, and then you can, once you know that clears, you can press it down. I should have gotten a little paper towel here to wipe off some of the excess. There we go, wipe off any of the excess that kind of leaks out the sides without mucking up our ice surface. Again, I like this E6000 stuff. Is unlike super glue, you can kind of rub it off if you get a little too much somewhere. There we go. Gonna do the same thing with this ramp. Again, I can see exactly where it went. And that's kind of what I was talking about. The angle or just the point of these aftermarket nets is just a little more, sticks out a little bit further. So this little peak on the net kind of interferes with it. So I can't put this back exactly where the original went. It's gonna sit back just a fraction of an inch. This is why I wait until the goals are in place to, in particular, put the behind the goal ramp on. Same thing, decent little dab in the corners. Just a fine little bead along the straight edges. Make sure it's centered up on our net. And press it down in place. Same thing with this one. I like closing the dome real quick just to make sure it's going to clear, which it does. And then again, this E6000, I think it takes a couple hours to set and 12 or 24 to fully cure. So I'm just gonna leave it like that, untouched for 24 hours. Obviously your results may vary depending on what adhesive you like to use, but that's all there is. Again, getting the ramps off and back on is really not as big of an issue as I think some people fear it would be, so don't let that discourage you from doing a checks project. So at this point, I gotta get the other side ramps back on, and the ice surface for our little North Stars project table will be all complete. Appreciate it, thanks for watching.